18th of March 2026. I'm going to start out just really quickly by going round the room so we can all introduce ourselves, because we have some new faces here, and just so we all know who we are. So I'll kick off. I'm Councillor Caroline Lever. I am chair of this committee, and I'm going to go that way. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor. Before you do this, sorry, I should have started out with, please can we use the microphones, because anybody who might be watching online or wants to pick up and watch the webcast afterwards will only be able to hear what we're saying if we speak into the microphones. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Michael Mitchell, Liberal Democrat, Dewey-Arden, Pennsylvania in Exeter.
Anne Mays, independent member.
I'm Ruth Saltmarsh. You can't work the microphone. Thank you.
Morning all, Andrew Ledbetter, County Councillor for Topsham and Wearside, leader of the Conservative Group.
John Hart, independent member.
Gavin Happy, Deputy Director for Legal and Constitutional Democratic Services.
Catherine Burnett, Democratic Services Officer.
Good morning, Julia Jones. I'm Governance Manager, and for the purposes of this committee, I clerk this committee.
Karen Strahan, Assistant Director, Democratic Services.
Morning all, Maria Price. I'm a Director for Legal and Democratic Services and the Council's Monitoring Officer. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you all very much for that. If at any point you can't hear what any of us is saying, please indicate and we'll try to make sure everybody can hear. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start out with apologies for absence. We've got a good number of people here. Are there any apologies? Okay, yes, we've got Councillor Jess Bailey, who is otherwise engaged.
Chair, we also have apologies from Ian Hitken, who's one of our independent members.
Lovely, thank you very much. So moving on to agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Does anybody, you've seen on the papers the information about registering any declarations of interest? Are there any to declare? No. Okay, lovely, thank you. So we move on to item 3, which is minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of November 2025. They're available on the website and I'm assuming everybody has read them. So we'll like to start out with the with accuracy. Any items of accuracy? No? Okay, in which case I think we have to just agree those. So can I have a show of hands to agree those, please? Okay, so those are agreed. Do you need me to sign anything? Oh, sorry. One moment, please. Thank you. Lovely, so those are done. I should say thank you so much. We have 3 independent persons here. You are very welcome. And it's also good to welcome, we have new staff. I believe, Gavin, you've only started with the authority very recently, so welcome. And Catherine too? No? Yes? Yes, lovely. You are all welcome. Thank you. Right, okay. Agenda item 4 is items requiring urgent attention. I'm not aware of any. Great, there's none. Do we need that door closing? I'm not sure. I mean, it's a meeting that public can come to if they want. Oh, lovely. We'll hold on just a moment while we sort this out. And just for the purposes of the record, I'd like to welcome Ray Hodgins. Thank you. You are most welcome. Thank you. Okay, so we have now moving on to standing items. Agenda item 5 is the ethical governance framework, the monitoring report of that. This is pages 1 and 2 on the agenda. It's a report of the legal services, Director of Legal Services, and I'm going to pass to her for this item.
Me.
And, I'm sorry?
It's actually me for this one,
Oh, I'm
Chair.
so sorry.
Okay, that's okay. So this report is obviously our regular item that we have, which is on the agreed arrangements that we have with the independent co-opted members to observe the meetings of the council, cabinet and committees, for them to monitor the compliance that we have around our ethical governance framework. So since the last report in November, co-opted members have attended a range of meetings as shown in the report, both in person and virtually, and their feedback is summarised there. Overall, observations have been positive with good or very good ratings across all the areas, such as conduct, use of language, quality of debate and chairing. Members were generally well prepared and officers were seen to provide clear and helpful advice. So that's all good. We did have some practical learning points which were noted. This was around, you won't be surprised, occasional problems with the microphones, which obviously we've experienced today, some clarity around some standing orders, and there have been some notes around having some longer breaks or some breaks in longer meetings when required. Overall, there were no observations that have raised concerns about potential breaches of code of conduct or anything that requires any further action.
Thank you very much. I was just going to ask, under at paragraph 4, we've got the various different bullet points. I just wondered whether you could perhaps outline some of the work that's taking place or has taken place to address some of those items. And I also note on the table on 3, which is beautifully laid out and really easy to read, that particularly around the third one down, the speech is clear, relevant, understandable, audio levels, that might be the issue here, use of microphones, etc. Again, if you could just tell us a little bit about what the council is doing. I suspect quite a lot of it is around dealing with these microphones, but perhaps in terms of any additional training that could be available, particularly for the 80% of councillors who are new to the authority. Thank you.
Yes, certainly. So I think what we've done is we've put in our chairs briefing notes at the start, we're sort of asking chairs to remind people about using the microphones. You can see they're directional. If I do that, then obviously you can't hear so well. So some of it is around some of that sort of learning as well. We are having some issues with the microphones at the moment around the batteries. We've been in touch with our facilities management team around that. So we're looking at trying to resolve some of those issues as well. So we're on the case with that. In terms of some of the other things that have been discussed, just having a quick look around any of the other issues. I mean, in terms, sometimes with the audio as well, it's, I think we have some rooms that you can't hear quite so well in, and obviously we have taken some actions around that. In the Rover room, there's a new device that's been put in there, so that's made a difference as well. And I think the other issues around breaks and things like that, we're having discussions ahead of meetings around where we think they're going to be long meetings, making sure we put that on chairs' notes as well. And, you know, just encouraging chairs to make a call when they need to in terms of taking those breaks. So it's regarding sort of having those discussions before meetings as well, which has been helpful.
I think the other thing to pick up on is, I don't like the sound of my voice, I sound terrible. I think the other issue is the ongoing induction programs. We're getting requests from across members for additional training, whether it's chairing skills, which we're running at the end of March. We've had requests for further training and understanding around meetings, procedures and standing orders. So again, that's something that we're going to be building into the longer term programme as well. So some of these issues, and obviously within a new council, induction is ongoing, and we are going to have to revisit some of the sessions that we've done previously. But obviously that's all good that we're being asked to do these things to develop that sort of understanding and learning, which picks up some of the points that are in this report as well.
Thank you very much. And of course, anyone can come through their group leader to request additional training, and I think it's the answers you've given are exactly what I would have hoped for and expected. Committee members and indeed independent, I'm not sure, independent people, I'm imagining you can ask questions too. I'd be very happy to hear your questions. So Councillor Mitchell, please.
Couple of questions, Chair. In relation to the written comments, etc. here, which relate to full council budget meeting, and the other meetings that took place that were observed, do the chairs or vice chairs together get independent look at this material before it's published to this committee? Because clearly, I think if it's a learning exercise, it is helpful if there's a debriefing session with the independent member and the chair reasonably soon after the meeting, so that they're both happy, and it's a reasonable assumption that it's a learning exercise for the chair as well. That would be helpful, I think. Whereas it looks like, you know, these could have taken place some months ago, and now we're getting a written report. The chairs aren't here. Do they automatically get any feedback on the meetings from the independent review? And secondly, in relation to the chart 3, which is a combination, I assume, of all the meetings that have taken place shown at 2, do you also show a breakdown so that we could differentiate if there are particular issues relating to a specific type of style of meeting, be it scrutiny, be it full council, be it a normal working committee, so that again, we as a committee can make suggestions about the way forward if particular issues are arising with a particular type of committee or a specific committee, whereas at the moment we're just getting aggregated figures. Thank you.
I'm going to pass to officers to respond. Thank you.
Yeah, we tend to do it by themes. So we would address themes through the training that we've just articulated. We don't do if there are serious governance issues, then we do pick that up immediately. But there aren't any serious sort of governance issues. It is more sort of training and learning or technology problems that we tend to pick up on a wider level. In terms of providing the breakdown, we obviously we get the individual sheets, but we don't do that in the public report. We'd rather deal with it through sort of learning and development rather than putting it into a public paper. You know, particularly if there's been a difficult meeting and the chair has struggled, it's probably not appropriate to have that sort of conversation. But we can look at the format, we can always do that. But we do, if there are specific issues, we would obviously pick those up. But I'm not particularly comfortable with saying this meeting, this happened, particularly if there was a challenging meeting and things happened that put the chair under pressure. I'm not sure that's overly helpful, but obviously Maria might have a view.
Yeah, I think that's quite right. We pick up individually with chairs as opposed to labelling a certain chair or a certain meeting in a report, which I think is the right way that we would address a concern.
Just clarify the point of it. Does the chair or even the vice chair or both of them see a copy of the report before it's presented to us so they're aware of what an independent observation of the committee meeting was? No.
I've got you, but I've got Councillor Ledbetter first, please. Oh, okay, Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you. So, yeah, that's much better. My batteries must have been down low. I'll just repeat that. I'm particularly concerned about the 2 grade 2s that were reported in table 3. And are there any lessons to be learnt by councillors themselves, other than lessons to be learnt by the chair, which what seems to be what we're focusing on? I'm, as a councillor myself, obviously I'm concerned about my input, and particularly at full council. So I take what you've said about this is an aggregate, but are there lessons to be learned? And I don't like to see 2s.
The answer is yes, there are lessons to be learned, and I've already sort of articulated around the sort of standing orders training, and listening to sort of advice from officers, so that will all be picked up. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Ledbetter.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, in fact, that was one of the issues I was going to raise, because if you look at the table from 1 to 5, I assume if 1 is very poor, presumably 2 is poor, and 3 is average, and 4 is good, and 5 is very good. So we seem to have glossed over the fact in your comments that there are ticks in poor, which has just been brought. So there's no reference to that at all. So I'd follow up and say, we need to address that. And the second thing I'd say, we've had problems with these mics for quite a long time. It really does need to get sorted. It's over a year, I would say. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, we're looking at some of these mics are quite old. There are a couple of issues really. Some of them are really old. They lose power, and also there's some logistical issues around making sure they're put on charge in the evening. We're picking up separately with facilities on that one.
I think that the point is that unfortunately it's not under our remit, but so we're in discussions with people who in that area to try and get this resolved as well. But it's very helpful for members to highlight the issues around this. So thank you. Regarding the
resolution from the Standards Committee that the bikes need sorted.
If members wish to do so, we will happily take that forward.
The recommendation currently is that the report is noted. If anyone would like to add something that the committee votes on and approves, then that is entirely up to you. Oops. So, Councillor Davis, thank you.
Oh, this is not my point that I was going to make later, but it's about the mics.
And I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Is it worth putting it down towards your mouth a bit? When it's lit, it should be working, but it maybe needs to be lowered slightly physically. So yeah, perfect. Thank you.
I think it might have warmed up by now. You're going to laugh now, my point. My point was going to be that we talk about the mics like it's something really important. These are few minor technical issues. So I've just had a technical issue. We've sorted it in 10 seconds. So we're focusing too much on something which is really not an issue, I don't think. Yes, it's an issue in full council, but then that's a different situation, I believe, when you have an audio company who deals with it. These mics in this room is not a problem, clearly.
So just coming back to the report, this is a report that the independent people who come and actually help us as a council, I will come to you in just a moment, if I may. that actually this has been something which has been reported, because whilst this particular issue has been sorted out, there are certainly some rooms which is more difficult. And certainly officers have just mentioned about the Roborough room, about a new bit of equipment. It makes it difficult for people not only within the room, but particularly in terms of the recordings that people then can watch. I mean, you know, I would encourage all members of the public to look at all of our committees, because particularly this one is an exciting committee. But I think that because the independent people have reported this as being a problem, I think it is something that needs to be taken quite seriously. And it's great that we've been able to sort that particular problem out here. I hear you, but actually it's part of our remit to be open and transparent, so that members of the public can actually hear what we're doing as well. Do you want to come back on that,
I just wanted
please?
to come back to say, I just wanted to make the point about, let's be careful that we're not nitpicking on when we should be focusing on much more important things than microphones.
I actually think that transparency and the public being able to hear what we're saying is actually really important. So, but I do hear what you say, Councillor Davis. Anne May, is it Mays? Is that how we say your name?
Mays, yes.
Thank
yes.
you.
Yes, my observation is that, and I've been doing this for some time, it's very, very rare to see ticks in 1 or 2. And so I think probably it has more to do with the fact that so many members are new and it's a learning curve. So hopefully with training, I don't think this is going to be a problem in the future. But ticks in 2 are very, very rare.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Mitchell.
Just come back on one bullet point, which took a considerable amount of time up at the budget meeting, which was the motion about safeguarding. Can we offer guidance to members regarding how you respond to cabinet responses? Because in effect, once something has been sent to cabinet, you're debating the cabinet recommendation in regard to your motion, not the original motion or the content of the original motion. You're either agreeing or disagreeing with the recommendation that's come back from cabinet. And I feel, again, a new member there strayed on that occasion, going back over what had started the whole proceedings instead of responding to the recommendation. I just wonder in future whether we can give guidance to members, particularly when it's referred back from cabinet, as distinct from a debate on the day, which is on the issue, which is entirely different. And I think new members just needed that extra guidance on that, and that possibly could have saved a considerable amount of time and frustration during that.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mitchell. And my thought immediately is it's the ongoing training has been, you know, eloquently explained there. Thank you, John Hart. I have you as well. But also I'm thinking that the briefing that the chair of full council gets, I wonder if we need to bung a little bit in there just again to reiterate exactly what people are talking about.
It is in there, but it's the sound's very difficult in the chamber. And sometimes when, the chair's given a lot of instructions on the rules of debate, it's not easy for people to follow. But picking up Councillor Mitchell's point, I think maybe we can do some work with the movers of those motions. So contact them individually to say, it'll come to cabinet, you have an opportunity to speak, cabinet will agree its response, and then this is the process that happens at council. So rather relying on the chair's sort of script and notes that we do, I think there's some work that we can do separately, Councillor Mitchell, to help understand, and we will pick that up as part of the standing order training as well. So it's kind of a 3-pronged approach, so hopefully that will help.
Thank you for that suggestion and raising the issue. Thank you. Yes, he's on my list. Do you want to chair this meeting? No, thank you. Well, I'll get on and chair it. Thank you. I almost called you Councillor Hart. I'm so sorry. John Hart, thank you.
Madam Chairman, I just felt that I should say the 2 ticks could well be mine in relation to the full council meeting, which, having sat through it, interestingly enough, I did feel it was a meeting that was somewhat disjointed. I think you as chairman had a really hard job at it, and certain councillors were not helpful to you in relation to the advice you were giving and the county solicitor was giving and the chief executive was giving. Now, I'm sure once I get used to it a bit better, hopefully people will begin to understand that when you have standing orders are there so that you actually have a meeting that makes sense. Not just because it's there, I'm going to ignore it. And it wasn't quite as bad as that, but there was certainly an undertone there that a length in the meeting I felt sorry for councillors at times, because you were getting repeat issues coming up and no extra, no extra benefit coming into the debate. So I put my hand up. With luck, I will never do it again, because with luck, councillors will not actually ask me to do it again. But I did feel strongly that if you want me as an independent person to be honest about your meeting, I have to do what I did. So I put my hand up. They could well be mine. Please, can I ask, I know you're trying, but groups, I think, would be worth talking to their group members as well, so that they begin to understand, although you do have far more groups than there used to be on this council. I'll just stop there.
Okay, thank you. And actually, if you felt as an independent person that 2, the box in 2 was the appropriate, I would encourage you to use that, because we rely on your honesty, your integrity, and so on, and we appreciate that feedback, so that we've actually got a clear steer as to this is something we need to be looking at. So please, if you feel that a 2 or even indeed a 1 is appropriate, please put that in.
Can I say, I hope I don't need it again, but I am enjoying some of these meetings, I must admit. Although I should say that with a warped sense of humour.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, my point is really about the length of meetings, particularly full council. When I looked at the last agenda, I could tell that was going to be a long meeting. But I also knew straight away that we were not going to be debating those motions. We were not going to debate the last 4 motions. They were going to go to Cabinet. And I was under the impression that motions were to be debated by the councillors. But it was clear from looking at that, and you're shaking your head, Karen, as if to say, no, they're not supposed to be debated. You don't want our opinions, that's fine. So
I'm sorry, I am actually going to leap in there. It is absolutely not the case that those are not debated. But the process, and I would encourage you to go back to the Constitution of the Council to understand the process. And as I lay out at the meetings, I explain at the meetings, is that the standard process is that a motion comes in and it is automatically referred to Cabinet in the first case, unless the mover of the motion makes an argument which Council agrees with that it is sufficiently urgent and time sensitive for it to be debated on the day. So, and then once, and if Council decides that yes, that's the case, then it is debated on the day, and that's it. That's the end of that one. But the normal process is that a motion comes to Council, it is referred automatically to Cabinet, and as Karen has just mentioned, the mover of the motion, and indeed any other councillor, can go along to Cabinet, can speak to that motion, can ask questions, and so on and so forth. And then whatever the Cabinet decides, that is what comes back to full council. So I hate to completely disagree with you, but councillors do. Please don't interrupt me. But please do not go around telling people that motions are not debated by councillors, because that is false. It is inaccurate. It's just a question of understanding the process. Thank you.
Why don't we not have so many motions on the agenda to start with then?
Okay, so again, this goes back, I suggest you go and read the Constitution, because it would maybe help your understanding of this. All councillors are able to put, well, this is part of the training, isn't it, about actually understanding the Constitution. This is why we have training, so that people understand the Constitution, which sets out the rules and the ways in which that councillors engage, can put things in. In terms of motions, there is a deadline, which all councillors know about. All councillors can put in a motions, whatever. They are accepted in the order in which they are received, and Democratic Services keep a very clear record of that. I feel I'm kind of perhaps saying the kind of things that Karen would say, but that is the established process. And if it's unclear, I think maybe we could do with some more training about that as well, because perhaps you've not yet fully understood all of that. I mean, let's face it, there's an awful lot of process when you come into the council for the first time. The Constitution is a vast and it could be seen as impenetrable by some people, but it is really worth Googling it and having a look at the particular part of the Constitution. But I will pass over to Karen for any further comment.
Yeah, motions is something, I mean, quite right, standing orders are that they're referred, and that's to give an opportunity to look at any legal financial implications. The chair's outlined that the council can debate them, but it's only when there's a simple majority vote in order to do so, normally when it's something time critical. Motions is something we spent a lot of time on through the governance working group in the former council. We did suggest as officers putting restrictions on numbers because we had no restrictions on numbers, whether we limited it per group, loads and loads and loads of options. Instead, we put the 2-hour time limit on there because actually meetings, I agree with you, they're incredibly long, and actually they're longer now than they used to be. What we do is that they come in the order, but instead of taking them now in the order received, if a member submits more than one motion, the first one goes at the start, the next one goes right to the very end, so any new ones that come in would go in second. So it's taken on that basis. So if members are submitting more than one motion, the first one submitted gets the priority. So obviously it's a matter for groups. I mean, groups have their own ways of dealing with motions and how they're submitted by their members, and I know as a group that you've changed your processes more recently. But yeah, that's the current sort of guidance.
So is there a limit to the number of motions that could be on the agenda?
No. But the time limit that's put on there would mean they would get referred, which is the proper process, and they would come back. But you're quite right. You're kind of, from an officer perspective as well, you're running the risk of that list getting longer and longer and longer, and sometimes we would, and as officers, we sometimes encourage members to say, well, actually, is there another way of dealing with this? Could it be dealt with through scrutiny or policy development, or is it something really simple that the administration would just sign up to, for example? So there are other ways of dealing with some of the policy issues that are coming through on motions. So we would just encourage all members to have those conversations in your group. That's really important. And look at what's the best way to achieve what you want to achieve. It could be a motion at council, or it could be another mechanism.
And if in doubt, it's always worth asking Democratic Services, because their knowledge of those different ways of doing things is probably is better than anybody else, better than mine, certainly.
Well, I feel like I've been suitably schooled by you.
Well, I think actually when I think it's important to understand that councillors do get an opportunity to debate, and I absolutely will not accept what you have said about councillors not being allowed to debate things. So it might have been said in jest, but I want to be absolutely clear for the public record. And if you don't interrupt me, I'd be grateful, because as chairing this meeting, interruptions don't really help. But for the public record, it is absolutely clear that councillors do get an opportunity to debate, and it's actually really important that councillors do have that, but there are also mechanisms, and as Karen has laid out, there is a really clear process about motions, and I think it's absolutely right to say that group leaders with their groups, that there is some, there are ways of group leaders managing what their group does, that perhaps all group leaders, and we've only got one in the room at the moment, but for all group leaders to have a look at actually what do they want to achieve and how best to do that. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, so going on to my next point, you were talking to me earlier on and telling me that the microphones is an important point from a point of transparency. So I really wanted to go on to the point of minutes of meetings. Transparency. So when a member of the public looks back at the minutes of meetings, like for instance, the meeting we had at the end of February, when I think there was something like 10 points of order and the councillor trying to be removed from the chamber, I just wondered why these are not actually accurately recorded in the minutes for people to see.
Okay, thank you. Just to point out that minutes are not a verbatim record.
I know.
But I'm going to pass you to officers for the response. Thank you.
Yeah, Points of order aren't generally recorded because they're clarification around process. The motion that you refer to where somebody moves, I think it was standing order 18, to have the member not speak any further or removed. I can't remember exactly which one it was. It was actually withdrawn, so it didn't go anywhere, and we wouldn't generally record things that don't go anywhere. Obviously, if that was moved and seconded and voted upon, absolutely, that would form part of the minutes, but it didn't go anywhere. It was withdrawn, which is why it's not recorded.
And I think from experience, the most important thing with the minutes is that the decisions are noted accurately and clearly.
There's no description in law about what minutes should be or what they would look like. Obviously, we have a house style that isn't verbatim, particularly for council, which is a very sort of formulaic body. So we do tend to focus more on the decisions and record very little debate at council. If you look at scrutiny minutes, there's more debate recorded. So we tend to try and capture themes. And again, cabinet, we focus more on the decisions element. So yeah, certainly not a verbatim record, but yeah, points of order is something we've never ever recorded because it is a point of clarity on a process at the meeting. I don't know if.
And I think just finally on that, all the meetings are recorded so the public can watch back and see exactly what was discussed and look at the debate. But the minutes are not meant to capture the full debate.
Okay. Any more on this item? Okay, so the recommendation is that the report should be noted. There was a suggestion maybe that there needs to be something else. Anybody moving anything? No, in which case I'll take you to the recommendation. All those in favour of the report being noted? And that's clearly carried. Thank you. So moving on to agenda item 6. So I will invite the Director of Legal and Democratic Services, Maria Price, to introduce this report, which is the future standing agenda items for the Standards Committee. Thank you.
I'm going to take this on, Chair, if that's okay. So this just gives a framework. Actually, Maria thought it'd be quite nice to bring a report to you in the future. So it'll be a standing agenda item that encapsulates a number of different things. So it might be what's happening nationally. Have there been any like juicy stories in the news, for example, ongoing consultations, and examples of that is obviously government currently consulting on the standards framework, things like hybrid meetings, haven't had the legislation through for that. So there are a number of items that already come to standards. So there's things like sort of code of conduct complaints. Obviously, we haven't heard any of those yet. They would be actually heard in part 2. So that's a role for the committee. Outcomes of investigations. We also look at things from the local government ombudsman. So if we've had an investigation at that level, we would bring any learning back to this particular forum. And also you receive regular updates on sort of complaints and compliments to the council. And also a number of annual items. So you'll see today we've got the annual report. So if you look at section 4.1, at a national level, we used to have the Committee on Standards in Public Life. Now it's called the Ethics and Integrity Commission. So we would look to see what's going on there. What are they talking about? Any national updates, ongoing consultations, also a huge number of LGA initiatives, sort of the Debate Not Hate campaign, and they have a massive programme of sort of wider civility work. Things like Operation Ford will come into that. But is there any case law that's happened on a national level? Any notable cases or any breaches that may have brought national attention? I'm not going to mention Jackie Weaver or anything like that, but they're the sort of, something that, maybe brings a bit of spark to the debate. So obviously any regulatory developments. So it's really, we're just talking about general horizon scanning plus anything that would be of note that we could bring any learning. So as I say, the proposal is outlined at 4.1. Is there anything missing there from your perspective? Is there anything that I've not mentioned that you'd want to bring into that space and you'd want us to cover in future reports? It won't be a decision-making report, but just something that will bring things out in debate, which should be quite good.
So I'm going to ask Maria just to add as well, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I think this came from the background of the world's changed a little bit as well. So we know that social media, we know that perhaps the way that we work with the public, it's changed. So again, we thought it'd be really, really useful, or I thought it'd be useful to bring to you some of that national position, what's going on, a little bit of guidance and a little bit of help around some of the do's and don'ts. So in the national position, you will also get the things that perhaps have been borderline when there hasn't been a breach that might be really, really relevant that you'd like to see how that's handled, and perhaps how that's handled by colleagues around the country when things are raised. So that's the background of where it came from. And as Karen said, we also wanted to just put back to you, this is a place where we uphold high principles, we uphold the Nolan principles. But is there anything else that you think we're missing that you'd like to hear here and be worked through a little bit differently? Thank you.
Councillors. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I'd like to make a suggestion that we expand the minutes of meetings to show a true record of what's happened.
And that's something that we can look at in the governance working group. It's not particularly somewhere to look at it here, but more than happy to speak to the chair of the governance working group and see if that's something that they want to explore and how we reflect in minutes. What I would say at the moment, we are completely legally compliant, but I'm more than happy to explore that through the working group. That is cross-party, so all of the parties are represented on that group to work through how we record.
Oops, thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay, so the recommendation is that the committee considers suggestions within the report and decides which matters to incorporate into a future standing agenda item for the Standards Committee relating to matters of national interest and topical updates. Okay, so all those in favour of that recommendation? Okay, any against? That looks clearly carried. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 7. So the Assistant Directors of Legal and Democratic Services will introduce this. The recommendation is that the committee be asked to consider and note the report. So I'm going to hand you over to Carl. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. So since the last meeting of the Standards Committee on the 17th of November, we've received 29 councillor complaints. There's a slight typo in the report as it refers to 28. This includes 5 complaints that were made prior to the last meeting, but had not made their way to our directorate. By contrast, we received 3 complaints in the previous, in the same period in the previous year. Of the 29 complaints, there were 5 where it was found that the preliminary tests were not satisfied, meaning that no further action would be taken. There were 4 findings of a breach involving a local resolution. So that's a slight update on the report, which because the papers were published last week. This consists of, in terms of the breaches that were resolved through a local resolution, 1 breach of the code by Councillor Richard Hopley relating to a failure to be courteous and respectful, and 3 breaches of the code by Councillor Mick Cockerham relating to an inappropriate social media post. The rest of these complaints remain in progress. For many of these, we are awaiting further information from the complainants. In terms of the subject matter, many of these complaints relate to social media use. And in a couple of cases, we've received multiple complaints that relate to a single social media post. Are there any questions about this report?
Councillor Mitchell, and then Anne Mays, and then Nick Hookway. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst not wishing to know individual details of complainants or people being complained about, I think it would be helpful if we as a committee were aware whether these 29 reports here relate to 29 different councillors, or whether there's a particular councillor is without naming him, he or she accumulating a large number of complaints, because I think that would be useful if there were then private discussions with group leaders, etc. on this issue. So though we've got 29 here, we don't know, it might only involve 6 councillors or 7, I don't know, in relation to that. And secondly, in relation to the complainants, are we getting the same people making regular complaints, either about the same councillors, the same political group of councillors, or a range of councillors? And again, I think that information would be useful, without disclosing who they are, of course, for us to know the extent to which this is almost semi-organised in some extent, or whether we need, as a council and as groups, to consider particular issues in relation to either people receiving complaints or people making complaints.
Thank you. I'm going to go back. Whoops, sorry, Carl, for that. Thank you.
Yes, I suppose at a high level, we have these 29 complaints relate to multiple councillors. There are two in particular where there were multiple complaints regarding a single event. So in that case, that one councillor has had, eight complaints, or sorry, 9 complaints. And then there was another one with a single event, and I think there were 4 complaints relating to that. In terms of the complainants, we do keep a spreadsheet behind the scenes, which has more detail. So we do keep track of the process, including who the complainants are, who the subject members are, what actions being taken, which independent person we're liaising with, at what stage of the process we're at. I suppose just thinking about the most recent complaints that we've had, which are summarized in this report. By and large, I would say that they are different complainants. There's definitely one that's made a complaint previously that I'm aware of because I dealt with it. But the complaint was, it's different subject matter in terms of the complaint being raised. In our policy, or in our complaints procedure, within the preliminary tests, which we use at the very outset to determine whether or not the complaint will be taken forward, one of the many components that we look at is whether the complainant is vexatious, whether they're making multiple complaints without any evidence or ability to substantiate that complaint. So we do take that into account, but so far we haven't had much experience of that recently.
Councillor Mitchell.
So normally you're dealing with the complainant and the person being complained about. And what role does the group or the group leader play in any of this, or how are they involved in the system?
I'll take that one. So group leaders are aware at an early stage. So the oversight you were asking for us, a group, that there is an awareness there. Perhaps not all the intricate details, but there is an awareness with the group leaders. And we would all, behind the scenes of the complaints, obviously informal matters or something that crops up, we would always deal with informally with group leaders. So yes, there's an awareness there. I was wondering if perhaps you might want to see the template slightly different from what you're asking. So would you want maybe an extra column that dealt with, is it from a member of the public? Is it from a councillor? Where are the complaints coming from? So perhaps we could do that if that helps differently on how we're reporting. We obviously wouldn't name unless we've got a breach.
But I think that would be helpful. And also, as pointed out, where you're getting multiple complaints about the same issue, that either says it's organised or there's a genuine concern by a wide range of people on this particular issue.
Again, we can probably deal with that in the template to a certain degree. So we group together if they're on the same issue. So again, it's just easier to report so you can see that. I don't think that's particularly the case on what you're looking at now. But we can definitely look how we report and how we reflect on the template to make it slightly more user friendly for you.
I think that would be helpful to understand better. Okay, I'm going to move over to Anne Mays, please.
Again, I was going to say what Councillor Mitchell has said, and particularly vexatious complainants. I was the independent convener for complaints for some years at the RD&E, and I met many of those. This is unusual, the number that we've got here. And again, I don't know whether it reflects the current climate that people are really quite sort of jazzed up over things and are very keen to complain. So hopefully it will calm down. But I think the points that you were making, Carl, are very relevant as well. So I think things will hopefully settle down. But it's certainly quite a shock to see so many. And we do need them categorised because it could be all for one person or for 2 or 3, or they all might all be independent. So without saying who they are and what they are, a bit more information, if it can be provided, would be very helpful.
Thank you very much, and certainly your experience elsewhere. We are grateful that you bring this to us and help us with this. Thank you. Actually, in terms of the numbers, I suppose, at the risk of asking a question anybody else was going to ask, I was just wondering about the impact in terms of capacity within the department dealing with this number. But
It is a very time-consuming process because we need to get it right, and we liaise with the independent person. We have 3, luckily, that we can choose from, so we try and make it as equitable as possible. But we have no control over the volume of complaints coming in, and we do have to follow our process. So it is quite resource intensive.
And I think, as we already alluded, I have got a deputy. I actually have 3 deputy monitoring officers that work alongside me, which I'm very lucky to have. But I do require the 3. They're kept busy.
Thank you, and it will be interesting. I've got you on my list. Thank you, Councillor Davis. It will be interesting to see monitoring at the next meeting, actually, whether this is a standard or whether this is maybe a blip. We'll wait and see. Next on my, I'm so sorry, hang on, back to Maria, thank you.
Apologies, Chair. I think that, yeah, we have a number of new members. I wouldn't say that any of the complaints that we've got are at the end where it's causing me a serious concern. I think you're quite right on the reflection of we have new members who are learning. So I would expect that this will drop.
Thank you. I have Councillor Hookway next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to get clarification from you, are we allowed to discuss individual cases that are on the on this list?
I will hand you to Maria for that answer.
Not at this moment. The list is the list because it's individual circumstances. So we're quite happy to share with you the nature of the complaint. A number of these are still going through the motions. They're not proven in any way. Should it be the case that we go to a hearing on any of these, then yes, you will be discussing, but that's dealt with in part 2 and within our process. So the actual individual circumstances of the cases, no, because it relates to individuals at the moment. You're just receiving the number, so you have an oversight of where they are. You'll notice some of these have already been no further action because they're not proven, they're not taken forward. So it'd be completely inappropriate to start discussing those and perhaps drifting into individual circumstances when there's no finding of any fault.
Thank you. And for transparency for anybody who may be looking at the webcast, part 2 is it's governed by a law that I don't know what that law is, but it's about things that we as a council can discuss privately for the reasons of various sensitivities.
Yeah, there's strict criteria outlined in law, so it's either relating to an individual or anything likely to reveal the identity of an individual, or things around contracts, tenders, things where by putting the information in the public domain, it could either put a company or the council at a disadvantage. So sensitive financial business affairs, those sorts of things, several others, but I won't bore you with that today.
Thank you. Okay.
Could I just come?
You okay with that, Councillor Hookway?
Well, I'm very grateful for the clarification. I don't wish to cause a problem, but I do have concerns reading the report. And so my questions, really, there are 2 questions related, which are related really to data protection and safeguarding. So can I have some assurance that where data protection laws have been broken, that the Information Commissioner has been contacted, and also where there are safeguarding issues that the police have been contacted as well? Thank you, Chair.
Maria, thank you.
Yes, you can have that assurance. We always do. So if it goes to something that's a criminal matter, if it's safeguarding, or if it's actually criminal conduct in any way, we would always contact the police. We have an obligation to do so. Same being with any data breaches, that would go through our usual processes with the data protection team, which does sit under myself. I'm also the CIRO for the council. So we'd do our assessment, and if it's something that has to be reported to the ICO, we'd do that within the relevant time period.
Thank you. Councillor Wainwright, thank you.
Thank you. I welcome the discussion around revision of the template, bearing in mind that actually members of the public will be looking at this and seeing that we've moved from 3 to whatever the number was, 59. That if I was just a member of the public, I'd be a bit distressed about that. I'd also just like some clarification around timelines, particularly the independent person, Anne Mays, raised about vexatious complaints. I note that some complaints in the 4th column, it says wrote to complainant and asked them to fill out the complaints form. I'm surprised that that procedure didn't happen right at the beginning. And is that causing a delay in the resolution so that we don't actually know yet whether that's a breach of conduct or not? And there was another one a little bit further down, awaiting complainants' responses. So are there timelines if somebody actually does bring forth a lot of work for our officers and makes a complaint? It's good to make complaints, but I think that whoever makes the complaint, it's their responsibility to make sure that timelines are met, if there are any timelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria, I think, or perhaps Carl?
Yeah, in terms of the way we receive complaints really varies because although we have our complaints process publicized on our website and, the whole guide is available and it's separated in, by topic, or you can download the entire guide, which is what I personally prefer to do. And we have a complaints form, which is downloadable and for that's ideally what a complainant would do because that gives us the information that we need to take that complaint forward. However, we often, and we have a dedicated mailbox that receives the complaints. However, in practice, we receive complaints through all sorts of means. They don't always come directly to the mailbox. Sometimes they go to the wrong location, and then it takes a while to actually get to the right location. Sometimes they just write an email and it doesn't contain, sufficient information. So in those cases, we ask them to, please fill out the form, but we have no control over whether they choose to do that or respond. Within our preliminary tests, which we do at the very outset, normally we won't take forward a complaint that's where the event happened more than 6 months ago. So some of these, I imagine, if the complainant does not actually follow up and respond in terms of providing sufficient details of the complaint itself, it will probably simply lapse. The complaints towards the end regarding a local resolution being offered, I'm actually dealing with that one, and I received many of these complainants have actually responded within the last few days. So it's simply the papers are published. I can't remember which date they were published, but I believe it was last week. So, this is a constantly evolving process in terms of the information on here.
Just to come in finally on the end of that, so we don't have an actual time scale when we write and say, can you fill out the form? That's not within the process. We would usually wait for that to come back after a certain time period. We write back and say you haven't provided it. Thank you, bye. If it's something where we've got part of a complaint and we're asking for additional details, we'd normally ask for those, and we'd normally put a timescale of reply in the next 7 days, reply in the next 14 days. It's not within our process. If they don't, we'd chase up and we then finally get to the stage of, if you don't, we need to close down. But that's probably something we can look at within our arrangements to say, actually, do we want to tighten it up? Do we want to put a timescale of days to reply back in? Which I'm happy to take away and think about. It's a very good point, actually.
Yeah, thank you. And just for clarity, it's 29, not 59 that has been received. Thank you.
Thank goodness.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so I've got you as well. So next I have Councillor Davis. Thank you.
I think it's correct to say that a lot of these complaints are to do with social media, and I think it stems from councillors following other councillors' Facebook pages or whatever social media and making public comment on them. And I just wonder whether it's something that should be put out as a guidance that they shouldn't make public comments because you're only going to create a situation where you're going to have a public argument. So whether they should be persuaded not to do that. Also, I wondered whether when you're doing your investigations, you actually look at the social media posts and look at the constituents' replies as opposed to the other councillor who's made their complaint, what their replies are. And I also wanted to know, in terms of free speech, where does the council's guidance come from that? Is that through the monitoring officer, or do we have a specific guidance on free speech?
I think that's a really helpful question. Thank you. I'm going to hand that over to Maria. Thank you.
So we do provide guidance on social media. We have social media training, and I think we're going to be looking at doing more of that because you're quite right. It's an area that's very easy to be misconceived, even in the way that you might intend to put a comment. So we're looking at further training on that. I've had specific discussions with group leaders around the use of social media and appropriate comments, and it was certainly picked up in the code of conduct training, which again I intend to refresh out back to everybody. So far as breaches and free speech, so guidance really comes from the code of conduct itself. We have a code that's very clear about actually how is a member of the public going to perceive what you're saying. So yes, of course, you've got the right to free speech. However, if you're then offending and breaching the code, that takes you into a different remit. And it's the code of conduct that you've all signed up to as members that I have the duty to effectively advise you on and walk you through, and that's what we go for. So the code of conduct was last reviewed, I think, May of last year. I don't think I'm fibbing on that. It could have been the year before. I am testing you. It could have been the year before, and the arrangements were last year. But that's something that you do as members effectively. I don't write your code. I don't write your arrangements. It's something that you do at full council and you adhere to, and that's the guidance that we go with. So far as evidence we collect, yes, we would look at the whole case when we're doing an investigation. So if a complaint comes in and it's about social media postings, if we're provided with those postings, it makes life a lot easier. Sometimes we have to search for them during the investigation, and things can get taken down and moved in between times because that's the joys of social media. But we would look at the whole when we do the investigation. Obviously, the comments that the council have made that the allegations are about are highly relevant and it's about how they're perceived, but we'd look at the whole. And you're quite right, there could be mitigating factors in there that need to be considered as well. Does that answer everything that you asked me? Thank you.
As the chair recommended, I probably need to go back to the constitution.
And actually, I would say that's not directed specifically at you. I think it's for all councillors, because particularly as we've got 80% of new councillors, and council procedures are not something we're born knowing about. So every single one of us, I would include myself in that group of people. It's not a bad thing to go back to the Constitution and indeed the Code of Conduct to remind ourselves of some of these things. So thank you. Councillor Ledbetter.
Just one quick question. Can you clarify what the reporting period is when you discussed that complaints have gone up from, I think you said 5 or 6 to 29? Is it a 6-month period or a 3-month? What are we looking at? I wasn't sure.
Okay, so the report talks about since the last committee meeting in November 25. I don't know how that compares with if there is a regular reporting.
The figures go back to September.
They're doing it, it's 6 months only you've got the figures on, so there will have been complaints that were from the May up until the September date, which you'll have had reported at our last meeting. So we're just looking over the last 6 months period.
If it's helpful, just to clarify, sometimes it's as exactly as Carl was explaining, where sometimes we're getting complaints come through from a different place, and then we aren't informed about it until a few weeks later. So that's where it refers to some of those things where we've subsequently, since the last meeting, been made aware of. But the date of when the complainant made the complaint was that date, but it just didn't come through the right channels or whatever. Yeah.
But yeah, 6 months, if
Yes.
again, as a committee, if you're wanting to see a different picture, that's something we can shape because we collect it, but these figures are just 6 months up until the day we published papers, I believe.
I come back just to say that there must come a point when they drop off. I mean, you've got some in September, so they need to be dealt with, don't they, or drop off, because you can't have that hanging over people for 6 months, I don't believe.
That's quite right. Some will hang over slightly, but yeah, they're dropping off all the time and they're coming on all the time. It's a rolling period. So so these figures won't show the ones that maybe came in May, June, July, because they'll have been dealt with. They'll have dropped off. Again, if you're wanting to see a different breakdown from us, we collect that. That's something you can ask me to do if you want us to do differently.
Okay. Okay. So thank you. Councillor Julian.
Ah, we've got one that works. Okay. There's just what I'm interested in. There's been a complaint from a county councillor to do with the town council, whereas the town council, I'm not mentioning any names, so it's fine. Town council that have been getting onto Facebook and all these other whatever it is. I don't use that stuff, so I wouldn't know. But it is, and then they're taking them back off. They're being derogatory comments on these things and then taken back off. And apparently, since this has been happening, it seems to be nobody's giving way. So we've come to an impasse here where you've got a county councillors trying to tell or speak to the town, and the town is just sort of sticking their fingers in their ears and not listening, and it's putting this person under immense stress. It's being reported to county, but nothing's being resolved, and I wondered where we go with this. They don't want to sort of say frustration actually is getting him down, and I wonder where we go with this to try and resolve it, because it is a bit of a logjam here, because nobody's talking to one another and we're all here to serve the public. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if you could help me on that, it would be lovely. I could feed that back.
Thank you, Councillor Julian. I know that Maria will be able to speak to this.
So if it's a complaint about town council or town councillors, that's not something that I can deal with as a monitoring officer here. It would back to the district monitoring officer, but I would say, can we take a discussion outside? And I'm more than happy to have a chat to the district monitoring officer and try and move things forward for you. But that's not something that you'd see reported in our figures, because I don't manage councillors that aren't county councillors. So I completely appreciate that the issues affecting a county councillor, but it's not something that can be dealt with within our code of conduct and arrangements. But if we have a discussion outside, Councillor Julian, it may be something that we can move forward differently, and I can have a different discussion with you to perhaps.
Excellent,
forward.
thank you.
Thank you.
So I hope that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, so anybody else like to speak to this report? Okay, so in which case I'm going to take us back to the recommendation, which is that the committee is to consider, which I think you've all done, and to note the report. So all those in favour of noting? Okay, I think that is unanimous. Thank you very much. And moving us on then to agenda item 8, which is the Standards Committee annual report. So I'm going to invite the governance manager, Julian Jones, to introduce the report, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this annual report actually covers the whole of the last year, including this meeting. So it is written, which I know one of our members spotted eagle-eyed, that I'd written it in the past tense, because it will get published after the meeting if everyone's happy with it as well, and goes onto the website. So it obviously summarises the work of the committee during this year, and highlights how, as a committee, you've continued to promote and uphold the high standards of conduct, ethical governance and democratic culture across the council. There's various different sections within the report covering the different areas that have been looked at over the year. including ethical governance monitoring, which we've obviously talked about in the meeting today. And I think generally observations have been that meetings have been well chaired and constructive and effective. And we have discussed that no behaviours were identified that would have warranted any further action under the Code of Conduct. We've also been busy with work in the Governance Working Group, which has really been focusing on strengthening governance processes, scrutiny arrangements, and clarity around roles and transparency in decision making. So some of the topics that have been considered, including committee procedures, public engagement, petitions, scrutiny processes, and appeals arrangements. And we have a action plan, ongoing action plan, which we regularly review. We've also looked at member training and development, and there's obviously been a lot of work within the last year on the induction and development programme for members. And there's been a strong emphasis, as we've discussed, around standards of conduct and ethical governance and information security to make sure that both new and returning members understand their responsibilities around these areas. Particular focus has been on training on cybersecurity and data protection, which has obviously been a key part of the programme as well. And again, ongoing training around those areas as well. The committee have obviously received any regular updates on complaints around councillors, as we've just discussed, and we've obviously noted there's been an increase in complaints, particularly following the start of the new council term. However, many complaints have been resolved at an early stage and did not meet the threshold for further action, while some others have resulted in either informal or advisory outcomes. We've also looked at customer complaints and the findings from the local government and social care ombudsman, and received assurance reports from our customer services manager. And members have been advised that whilst complaints were upheld in some cases, the council had often taken appropriate action to remedy issues ahead of that and demonstrated learning and early resolution. Member safety has also been an important focus. We've considered national findings from the LGA's Debate Not Hate work and maintained oversight of local arrangements, including Operation Ford, which has supported councillors experiencing abuse or intimidation. And work has progressed on a member safety audit to provide assurance around reporting routes and support arrangements that are proportionate and effective. So looking forward, hopefully we'll continue to monitor national developments in standards and conduct. We've talked about the future agenda items, which we're going to include, and obviously be keeping an eye on the government reforms to local government standards framework. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anything you wanted to add at all? No?
No, other than a thank you to Julie
Lovely.
for pulling this together.
Thank you. Committee members, any questions, comments? Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Just two comments. One on the government's review working group section, which both Councillor Ledbetter and I are members. For a period of time, we did discuss local government reorganisation, and there's no mention of that within the text. And I just wonder whether a sentence needs to be added that for the period up to the submission, the committee were involved in discussing that on a regular basis. That was all. And the second point is in relation to customer complaints. Whilst we note that only one ombudsman ruling was against us, which again led to no action, I think it is helpful if we indicate how many complaints went there that were resolved in our favour, because it is helpful to know a relationship between the number of issues the LGO, the ombudsman looks at in relation to Devon, and the number that are put to one side out of, if it was 10 and there was only one, I think it gives the public a context of where we are. And I think that would be helpful in the data. Thank you.
Yep. So Julia is indicating, nodding, saying yes.
No problem. Good suggestion. So I'll include that.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, just referring to the looking ahead part of the report, when it says at this meeting, we identified proposals for consideration regarding how future agenda items might be identified and structured to support effective oversight. Can you just remind me what those were?
So that was the national update, the case law that's happened nationally, anything that's of interest to effectively that you might want to see as a committee. So a bit more of the national position, some of the case law and some of what's happening nationally with perhaps standards cases, ones that are found and maybe ones that aren't found.
And I think we covered this in agenda item 6. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Davis?
Did that include my suggestion about minutes?
I believe that it was suggested that there'll be a discussion with the chair of the government's working group. Yep.
That's correct,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So, Anne Mays, please. Thank you.
I note the section on member safety and well-being, and I wondered whether you'd noticed any particular problems with this, because obviously member safety is very important. And I just wanted some clarification that, do we have any problems? Is it being dealt with? Do members feel safe?
Thank you for your question, Julia or Maria?
So as much as we haven't had any particularly nasty problems, we have seen an increase in social media posts that we have to act upon really, really quickly and has to be taken down, which have targeted particular members, and we get for officers as well. I've also dealt with a number of sensitive register requests from May of last year that I've never seen the number that I've had before of those. And that is where members perhaps have had a really difficult time. Some of them even from literally from pre-election it started. So I've got a number of sensitive register requests, which I always deal with very, very sensitively. We review every 6 months, but I've never seen that level before. So have we got a particular problem that stands out to the rest of the country? No. Are we more vigilant than we have been in the past? Yes, I'd have to be honest. And we have seen much more of perhaps social warrior, keyboard warriors. It's something that we are seeing more and more of, and we're really alive and really vigilant to that. So certainly through my communications team, I do a really sterling job of tracking what we're seeing on media, and if I'm alerted to anything, then we would immediately act upon that. We contact, be it X, be it Twitter. Well, it's not Twitter now, it's X, isn't it? Facebook. A lot of the sites where it happens, we'd immediately contact, we'd ask for those taken down, and we'd wrap support around the member wherever we can. I haven't got any nasty legal cases or anything going through, but we're vigilant. So unfortunately, yeah, we have to be vigilant and we act upon it.
Thank you for that question, and actually for the care that you show for councillors. It's much appreciated. I mean, I suppose for me that the follow-on from that, which I will come to you in a moment, is that for any of the staff going through all these social medias, whether there is support in case there are trigger points or, in terms of any distress that might be caused to staff who are looking to protect us.
Quickly come back on that point before Karen answers. So yes, there certainly is, and we really upped our offer to staff insofar as the peoplehood and well-being, and that's something that we do have an awful lot of support with. Yes, so that there's access to staff members should this happen, and unfortunately, staff members get targeted too. So again, we immediately act upon any of those and would wrap around and support our teams when that does happen.
Good, because you matter as much as we matter. So, and indeed, for all of us in public life, in whatever guise, none of us put ourselves up to be attacked. But anyway, so Karen.
Yeah, it was just to articulate all the support areas that Maria articulated. That really encompasses itself in the member safety audit, which we asked for. So we asked internal audit to have a look at our processes, what we do. Are we missing a trick actually? And I'm expecting that draft report next week. So hopefully we'll be in a position to sort of share that and take forward any recommendations that come out of that. As part of that, we've gone to other authorities and say, what do you do in relation to this? To obviously take on any best practice. I think there might be a couple of recommendations around the reporting mechanisms. I think there's still a lack of consistency and clarity. So I think that's where the recommendations may well go. Well, that was the early hint I got anyway. But yeah, we'll look at where we bring that, whether we bring that audit report here. I think it might be nice to do that, to bring that here to this space, if members are happy with that, and obviously share that learning and anything we need to implement on the back of that audit.
I'm sure this committee would appreciate seeing that report and having a discussion about it. Any more questions, comments? Nope. In which case I go back to the recommendation, which is that we are asked as a committee to consider and comment and endorse the report. So we have considered, we have commented. So can I have a show of hands for those who endorse this report? Okay. Any against? Any abstentions? Okay. So that is carried. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of this meeting. Can I thank all of you for attending and for making this such an interesting meeting. It's always good to have a meeting where people bring questions and ask for clarification on items. So thank you all. Thank you. Meeting closed.